Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to GEEXX Reads. Today I'm going to talk about Death Masks by Jim Butcher, an image which you'll see here. This is the fifth book in the Dresden Files. uh, as always, minor spoilers, although mostly I'm going to just outline Act 1 as usual. There's kind of a lot going on in this book, though. How do I start? In the first chapter, Harry is on a talk show, basically a crappy talk show that has a lot of like fake crap on it, like we would expect. Not a good talk show, but Harry's on there discussing the paranormal with, we get to see Mortimer again. Mortimer was in Grave Peril. He's the ectomancer. He's a magician who specializes in dealing with priests. He specializes in dealing with ghosts. Sorry. The other panel is a paranormal investigator, Dr. Ortega from South America, and a priest, Father Vincent. That's why I got confused there for a second. So that's how the story opens. But it turns out that Ortega is actually there as part of the Red Court of Vampires. They are challenging Harry to a duel because the war between the Red Court and the White Council of Wizards is still going on. A duel would at least end the war. That's why Ortega is there. Father Vincent is actually there to get Harry Dresden to find the Shroud of Turin, which has been stolen. So, and this is in just chapter 1. Murphy soon asks Harry to investigate a dead body, a body which has no head and no hands, so they can't identify it. And at some point, Harry's ex-lover Susan shows up. She has not been cured of her vampiric curse. There is no known cure anyway, but until she feeds, she still remains human. She's kind of like a half vampire. This is pretty much a lot of what's going on in the first act. There's more to it though. But those are the basic plot lines, Harry with the sudden experience of his ex-lover, Susan, the emotional tension there. There's a duel with the Red Court vampires. There's finding the Shroud of Turin. And there's a murder investigation. And how do these things tie together? There's a lot of threads going on here. And they're sort of connected. I don't want to spoil too much about how they're connected, though. Initially, it's unclear. And then, they're not entirely connected either. Not all these thread lines are connected. There are some tenuous threads between them, some of them stronger than others. Some of them are very connected, some of them are tenuous, like I said. But in this book, we also expand the roster of characters that we're interacting with. I mentioned we get to visit Martin again, the ectomancer from Grave Peril. Is it Martin? Or is it? I keep saying Martin. Is it Mortimer? Sorry, I'm getting my names mixed up. It was Mortimer. Anyway, Mortimer is doing better. In Grave Peril, he'd basically weakened his magical abilities by basically doing cheap cons to try and get widows to pay him to talk to their dead husbands. That wouldn't necessarily work. Morty's doing better now, which I'm glad to see. He's not a major character. He's a little side character, but little side characters like this who occasionally pop back in when Harry has a question kind of helps to make this world feel lived in. Characters don't just show up and then disappear completely, and they don't suddenly become major secondary characters either. They just they rotate in and out of Harry's life like ordinary people would. So we get Mortimer. We also get to briefly see Thomas Wraith, who is one of the White Court vampires who we again also saw in Grave Peril, in Harry's interactions with the Red Court. Thomas Wraith does make an appearance. I do like Thomas. he is a fun character. For a White Court vampire, he seems decent as a vampire can be. He doesn't seem to have as much of a sadistic streak as the other vampires do. He's just here to have a good time. Thomas is a party boy, and plays it to the hilt. I really do enjoy Thomas's character a lot, in spite of the fact that he's very only briefly appears in here. Karen Murphy is here, not as much. In spite of the fact that she asks Harry to investigate the murder, they really don't interact much in this novel. She's a secondary character, a minor secondary character in this book. You see more of Susan. She comes back. Who else? Oh, we get to meet Butters. Butters is one of the coroners that he's working with Murphy about the headless and handless body. And he listens to polka music while he's doing his autopsies. I like Butters too. Butters is a fun character. We don't see a lot of him in this book. There's no hints that he'll show up in the other books as far as we know. But given that, he is a coroner who's dealing with corpses from supernatural events, there is a chance we'll see him again. We see Michael again in this book, more of Michael's family. We get a brief interaction with Michael and Charity's oldest daughter, Molly, who is a teenager through and through. Despite being raised by extremely Christian parents, she's still a teenager. We meet the Denarians. I will not tell you anything about them. They are a loose organization. And they are, in some aspects, bad guys. I won't give you any more details about that. The details about that unfold about the Denarians I found very interesting. I'm only mentioning them by name because they're mentioned in the book. And we get to learn about them in the book. So Father Fort Hill makes a reappearance, although very briefly. Did we encounter him in Grave Peril? I think we did. He is the father of a church that Michael tends to frequent, or that is used that Michael, as a Knight of the Cross, tends to deal with for the supernatural events of that nature. Speaking of Knights of the Cross, it is mentioned that Michael, in previous books, that Michael is a Knight of the Cross, an order that hunts the supernatural, and Michael has a sword, whose name is Latin that I can't pronounce, that is imbued with one of the nails from Jesus' crucifixion. But Jesus was crucified with 3 nails. So it would stand to reason that there are 3 swords, and more than one Knight of the Cross. So, in this book, we also learn that there is more than one Knight of the Cross. That is put to the rest here. I did enjoy that aspect of the novel as well. I was disappointed that we actually got to interact with them so little. The Order of Knights of the Cross actually seems very interesting. And we really don't know much about it. Even, like I said, the appearance of other Knights of the Cross, we really don't get to interact with them much, aside from Michael. At least in this novel. I don't remember other interactions in future books. I know that there's obviously other interactions in future books with Knights of the Cross, but I don't remember too many details about some of them. I remember some. But Michael's a recurring character. I've mentioned the other recurring characters, Susan, Michael, Mortimer's back. We can assume we'll see Butters again. And we can assume we'll see Father Fort Hill again, too. I love the series itself, so obviously I enjoy the Dresden Files novels. However, this book really marks a shift in the tone of the novels. The first 3 books in the trilogy were really noir detective novels, with Harry as a wizard detective. they're murder mysteries. And Grave Peril was less of that. Was more like a spooky ghost story. Summer Night was, again, back to being a detective thing. And there's some detective aspects in this. But with Summer Night and now again with Death Masks, this is less noir detective, more modern wizard living in Chicago. Which is not a bad thing, necessarily. But, I started buying the books because of the theme. I really enjoyed the blending of those themes, the blending of the noir detective themes with the wizard themes. I really liked how that was done. And I still do. But things are slowly shifting. And this really marks, for me, the most noticeable shift. Although I guess Summer Night had that as well. But I think it's really kind of, it's definitely moved away from the detective stuff. Harry's still a detective. There's still murder mystery and stuff. But we're kind of moving more towards just Harry's a modern wizard living in modern Chicago, less noir detective. So, and that shift moves more towards the wizard in Chicago. It moves away from being detective stories, which they're still good stories. Don't get me wrong. I still enjoy the series. Otherwise, I wouldn't have every single book in the series if that were not true. I just wanted to mention that, as the series is progressing, Harry's character is evolving. I think that's a good thing. His relationships with some of the recurring characters are also evolving. They're not stagnant. They don't necessarily go the way that we expect them to go. Like, Harry's relationship with Susan. She was bitten by, Harry was going to ask her to marry him. And now she's, half vampire and trying to deal with that. And she, things are changing. Harry's life is changing and Harry's life is evolving. And it's done in a way that feels, and this sounds odd, it sounds mostly realistic, or at least believable. I think that's a better term for it. Harry's relationships feel believable. They're kind of tropey at times. And as I mentioned in my previous review of Summer Night, there's the repetition. Butcher feels that he needs to reiterate every single aspect of Harry's life in case you've never read the books before. So yeah, the plot exposition becomes exceedingly repetitive, which is why I'm spacing these books out with other books in between, which I've also mentioned in the past. So they're still a fun read and I still enjoy them. But, it's changing, and I think it's changing in a good way. If the stories aren't getting better, they're changing in a way that's believable, I guess. As Harry's life changes, the stories change. And I rambled on about that for far too long. I could have just said that one sentence, maybe 2 sentences, and been done with it. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching. As always, my stuff is crap. And until next time, good hunting.